Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here on Capitol Hill at the conclusion of an Amphibious Warship Industrial Base Coalition breakfast at which members of Congress spoke, as well as the Commandant of the United States Marine Corps, General David Berger. And it's our honor to be talking to Mike Gallagher, who is the member of Congress, PhD, former Marine, and also a member of Congress, Republican from the great state of Wisconsin. Sir, thanks very much for the time.
Good to be with you again.
Always a pleasure. So you wrote a paper that ran on War on the Rocks, a commentary. I want to ask you about that in a moment. But first, talk to us a little bit about the administration's naval plan. The budget, 2021 budget request, is up on the Hill. It's, I think, a disappointment to some navalists. There was a lot of talk about 355 ships. You and I spoke about that at the Reagan Forum as well. Talk to us about the reaction and how the committee is going to be looking at it, and members of Congress are going to be looking at it, because at a time when everybody's talking about the importance of Seapower, it looks like we're taking a step backwards on this budget. What's your sense?
Yeah, I think it's created a lot of initial confusion. I think it's impossible to grow the fleet to 355 within 10 years, as the acting SecNav has talked about, while simultaneously cutting the shipbuilding budget by about 20%, I think. The budget cuts it. So I think there's going to be a lot of hard questions as we in HASC hold hearings. Now the good news is this, I think there is a lot of good work being done. I asked the Commandant in there about the integrated naval force structure assessment. Just the very idea that the Navy and the Marine Corps are working together on a force structure assessment is a remarkable thing, and it really proves that they're taking seriously what I think is going to be the sine qua non of success, which is naval integration. I thought the Commandant's remarks today were totally on point. I think he's saying all the right things. His planning guidance continues to be really, I think, the moment when the national defense strategy has gone from idea to reality. So while we will be asking a lot of hard questions about the budget, while a lot of us navalists are disappointed to see the shipbuilding budget get cut, and while we're still awaiting what the integrated plan is for what the future fleet looks like, I do think there's a lot of support for the new thinking that the Commandant has put forward, and it seems like the Commandant and the CNO are increasingly on the same page.
Are you satisfied? I mean, it begs the question why it's taken so long to get an integrated Navy Marine Corps plan out of the service. Are you satisfied that this is going to go beyond rhetoric and actually be the kind of integrated force you called for in your War on the Rocks essay?
Well, I'm encouraged by not only what the Commandant said here today, but what he's been saying and writing about. I'm encouraged by what CNO Gilday has said. However, 3 years ago when I first came to Congress, we did a lot of stuff to reinforce the idea that the 2016 force structure assessment, which called for a 355 ship fleet, was the way to go. Now we can, change a few things here or there, but we wanted to march out quickly on achieving that goal, and here we find ourselves again having made a little progress, but questioning the idea of 355, which to me is the wrong thing to be doing, or at least the wrong signal for the Pentagon to be sending. Now I know all these require hard choices, and I have enormous sympathy for the Secretary who has to make hard choices among the services and programs, but it's up to the Navy and the Marine Corps to make the case for why we need Seapower to have a disproportionate share of the budget if you look at the geography of Indo-PACOM, which is the priority theater.
But what I'm sort of curious about, and I think a lot of other people are asking, is the President of the United States, his National Security Advisor, were talking about the importance of 355. We heard that message delivered at the Reagan Forum, and yet we've got a plan coming out of the administration that actually fails to achieve that 355 goal, right? I mean, so what's the way to work that problem? Dr. Gallagher.
Well, it requires people like me to ask some tough questions, because I think it's fair to say there is a disconnect there. The President has repeatedly reinforced the goal of a 355 ship Navy and the promise of smaller ships, right? The future frigate, smaller amphibs we talked about in there, unmanned ships, unmanned underwater vessels. So I think there are ways to do it where we're not just building Ford-class aircraft carriers at the cost of $13 billion per, but it requires both consistent presidential leadership, but also his people to reinforce that and for that to get filtered down through the ranks.
Last 30-second question. The first four Littoral Combat Ships would be retired under this plan. Your district builds one of the two classes of a Littoral Combat Ship, and in fact, Fincantieri Marinette Marine is also in the competition for the frigate. We saw the frigate get cut back and those ships being retired. Is that a good move on from your standpoint?
No, because listen, I can understand the idea to, Gilday has this great phrase where he says we can't keep wrapping 96 VLS tubes around $2 billion hulls, right? Well, the whole idea of the frigate and the LCS is those hulls don't cost $2 billion, right? Particularly as we modernize our production line and sort of learn sort of things about how we manufacture these ships. So we need to expand the smaller ships and really rebalance the high-low mix and have more of the low and potentially less of the high. So I don't think it makes any sense to cut smaller vessels and some of the experimental concepts that we heard from the Commandant out there. So there's a way we can do this, and I think, if the Commandant and the CNO and whoever the next SecNav is going to be comes to Congress with a map of the first island chain and says, this is what the Chinese are trying to do, this is what we want to deny them from doing, and here are the ships and the subs and the intermediate range missiles with dispersed teams of Marines that we need to do, that we need in order to deny them their objectives. If they tell us a simple story, I think there will be a ton of support for that. But we can't be the ones telling that story by ourselves. The Navy needs to believe its own story, convince Congress, and then Seapower advocates in Congress can convince our colleagues and the American people.
Mike Gallagher, member of Congress from the great state of Wisconsin, former Marine as well as PhD. Sir, thanks very much. Always appreciate the time and look forward to talking again because I got some bigger strategery questions to ask you.
I love strategery. It's my favorite subject. Good to see you, Mike.